My sister used my name for something deceitful and slapped me, until my secret husband walked in, and fear drained every color from her face. Hello, I'm Elodie. People say family should be your safe place, your truth. But what if your truth is the one they keep rewriting? My sister slapped me in the middle of a jewelry store, in public, in front of strangers, and the only person who stood up for me wasn't even family. Worse than her hand across my face was the lifetime of quiet cuts before it, being erased from family photos, blamed for debts I didn't owe, and told by my own mother, "You were never meant to lead." So when a billionaire called me his wife and told her, "Touch her again and see what happens," was that justice, or just the first time someone finally saw me? Would you have stayed silent as long as I did? I showed up right on time, not early, not late, just enough to avoid being that daughter who was trying too hard to be noticed. The sun was dipping behind the Santa Barbara hills as I parked 2 blocks down from the house I grew up in, now bustling with rented lights and blooming floral arrangements. Isolde's wedding rehearsal dinner was tonight, and apparently I had a role to play, unpaid, uninvited, but expected. The driveway was full, which wasn't surprising. The Varelli name still held social weight in Mission Canyon, even if that weight had never landed on my shoulders. I stepped around the back entrance as instructed. My mother didn't want me making an entrance that might confuse the vendors. She said it kindly, of course, smiling with that brittle warmth that had raised me inside controlled, polished chaos. Isolde, dressed in cream silk and commanding a clipboard, was directing the lighting tech with the confidence of someone who had never heard no, unless she was the one saying it. "Elle," she called over without looking, "can you make sure the gift table has the right tags and maybe straighten the place cards at table 5? They're uneven." My mother, hearing this, approached with a kiss to my cheek and a coffee cup, not for me, but for a florist. "Elodie's always had an eye for detail," she said, smiling at the florist instead of me. "She's our secret weapon, aren't you, honey?" I nodded. No one noticed. There was no place card with my name on it. Not at table 5. Not at any table. So I ate near the kitchen, balancing a plate on my lap while the servers restocked the charcuterie. And I told myself it was fine. I wasn't hungry anyway. That wasn't the first time I'd been placed behind the scenes. I remember being 12, lighting every candle for my mom's birthday while Isolde stood at the front of the room accepting hugs and compliments for the party. I had handwritten the menu, marinated the chicken, and folded the napkins into roses. My father raised his glass and said, "To Isolde, our family's real hostess." And I smiled like I was supposed to. I never corrected anyone. I thought that was grace. I thought it made me strong. Back in the present, I watched from the edge of the rehearsal dinner as relatives posed for pictures. Isolde looked radiant in every frame, her cheek kissed by her fiancé, her arm around our mother, their laughter synchronized. One of the family friends waved me over for a photo. But just as I stepped forward, Isolde placed a hand lightly on my arm. "You look tired, Elle. Why don't you sit this one out? The lighting's kind of harsh over here." I nodded. No one noticed. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. I did laundry. I rearranged the spices in my cabinet alphabetically. I checked my email twice and I scrolled. There it was on Instagram, posted by my mom, a surprise pre-wedding brunch, matching shirts, a cake with gold lettering, and a slideshow playing behind them filled with baby photos, my baby photos. My sister's voice over the video, "Family is everything." I wasn't invited. There was no call, no text, just a caption, "Surround yourself with those who matter most." I put the phone down. My apartment felt like it had swallowed sound itself. No one had remembered, or worse, they had remembered and decided I didn't belong. I didn't beg. I didn't dial their numbers just to ask why. Instead, I stood in my kitchen and whispered, barely above a breath, "If I don't matter to them, I'll start building a life where I do." The message was short. I typed it, stared at it for 10 seconds, then hit send. "Can we talk this weekend?" I didn't wait for a response. I went back to counting inventory at the boutique. Tuesday afternoons were usually quiet, just me and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. But that day the silence didn't soothe me, it pressed against my chest like humidity in the middle of fall. A little after 4, the front bell rang. I looked up, expecting one of our regulars or maybe a UPS drop-off. Instead, a woman I didn't recognize stepped inside, tan linen blazer, oversized sunglasses, clutch in hand, like she was about to walk into a boardroom, not a boutique. "Hi," I greeted her, trying to keep my tone neutral. She didn't smile. "Are you Elodie?" "Yes. You vouched for Isolde Varelli, didn't you?" Her voice was flat, clipped. She told me she was starting a family investment circle. It took me a second to realize what she was saying. "I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean." Her eyes narrowed. "She said you were her reference, that you told people she was trustworthy." "I gave her $25,000, Elodie. That's not pocket change." I stared at her, throat tightening. "I didn't. I never said anything to anyone about any investments. I wasn't even aware of this." She exhaled, irritated. "Then why would she name you? Why would she say you were involved?" I couldn't answer because I didn't know. Because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Because my name had been a convenient prop in Isolde's life for longer than I wanted to admit. "I'm sorry," I said, calmer than I felt. "I'll speak to her, but please know I didn't authorize any of this." She gave me a look like she'd heard that line too many times before and left without another word. The store was empty again, but the air had changed. I closed early. I couldn't pretend I was in the right frame of mind to smile and offer scarves and scented candles. On the drive home I didn't blast music like usual. I needed clarity, not noise. At my apartment I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and dialed. Isolde picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Elle. What's up?" "Someone came into my store today," I began. "Said you used my name to get money for some investment thing." She was silent for just a moment too long. "Oh, that, I repeated. "Come on," she said, a light laugh behind her words. "I figured it was fine. You're the grounded one. People trust you. I didn't think it'd be a big deal. You used my name without telling me. Elle, don't be so dramatic. It was just a small thing. You know how these circles work. Everyone vouches for everyone. You're good with people. You calm them down." She said it like it was a compliment, like she'd gifted me a role to play. "I'm not your human buffer, Isolde." There was another pause. "Oh my God, Elodie, are you seriously upset? Mom said you always take things too far." "It's not like I scammed anyone. I'll give it back." "That's not the point," I said, already knowing it was useless. That night I didn't sleep right away. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it made slow, rhythmic turns above me. My mind wandered back to 3 years ago. Isolde was interviewing for a director role at a nonprofit that supported single mothers re-entering the workforce. She'd asked me to help her with her presentation. We'd spent a weekend together, me drafting slides, editing language, coaching her tone. She got the position. At the award dinner she gave a speech about women lifting each other up. She never said my name. When she introduced me to the board afterward, she laughed and said, "This is my sister. She's the quiet one." The quiet one. I got in my car the next morning and drove toward Carpinteria. Not for any reason except that I needed to see the ocean. I parked near the cliffs and walked to where the sand met stone. The sky was overcast, the water slow and steady like breath. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet because I thought it was the right thing to do, that silence kept peace, that self-erasure was a form of strength. I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe silence just gave people more room to step over me. By the time I returned home, something inside had shifted. Not an explosion, but a reset. I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, looked at years of holiday gifts, passive-aggressive potluck reminders, and photos where I was always off to the side. Then I deleted it. I went to my contacts, scrolled to a name I'd saved after a legal workshop I helped host last spring, Augustine Cade, legal. I typed one sentence, "Can we talk this weekend?" And this time I waited for the reply. Then I clicked accept. I stared at the calendar notification a moment longer before locking my phone and setting it face down on the arm of the couch. The living room had gone quiet except for the low whir of the old ceiling fan overhead. Outside, a soft breeze rustled the orange tree just beyond my kitchen window. I didn't move. Not right away. I stood up eventually, more out of instinct than decision, and walked toward the linen closet. Inside, pushed behind a stack of mismatched towels and a faded Christmas table runner, was an old wooden box with brass hinges, the kind my grandfather used to keep his tools in. I pulled it down, brushing away a layer of dust as I sat cross-legged on the floor. Inside were pieces of me I hadn't looked at in over a decade. Tucked beneath dried lavender and curled edges of photographs was a folded sheet of notebook paper, the kind with the perforated edge still clinging on. My handwriting, too neat, too desperate, read, "I wish you'd tell them I helped, too." I remembered writing it. 16, raw with some ache I couldn't name. I had planned to tuck it into Isolda's book bag before a school trip. I never did. I kept telling myself I'd outgrow the need to be seen. I unfolded it again, read every word like I was seeing it for the first time. Then I reached for a matchbook in the drawer under the TV. The first flame flickered just past my fingertips before I closed the matchbook again. I didn't burn it. I folded the letter even smaller, tighter, and slipped it into the front pocket of my jeans like it needed to come with me for whatever came next. I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes. 13 years old. That's when it started for real. Mom and Dad were hosting their 20th wedding anniversary at home. It was going to be small, just close friends, some coworkers. Isolda had volleyball practice and couldn't help. So I stepped in. I planned it. Every detail, the timeline, the playlist, even the table placements. I color-coded the menu based on who had dietary restrictions. I stayed up until midnight handwriting the guest cards because our printer jammed. The next morning I found my binder, ribbons added, my handwriting traced over in silver pen, Isolda's name on the front cover. I froze. I didn't ask. I didn't say a word. She handed the binder to Mom at brunch, who beamed and said, "That's my girl, always the leader." I remember holding my original binder beside the trash can in the garage. I stood there for a long time before finally dropping it in. I told myself back then she needed the win more than I did. And that became my excuse for everything. She needed the attention. She needed to feel capable. I told myself that letting her have it wasn't weakness, it was kindness, maturity, love. But the truth? It was silence. A silence I had agreed to because it kept the house from cracking. I opened my eyes. Back in my apartment, the light was dimmer now. Shadows crept along the tile floor. I stood and crossed to the mirror above the sink. I stared at my reflection, not for beauty or age or lines I hadn't noticed, but to meet something in my own eyes. "It wasn't okay," I said softly. It didn't echo back in the physical sense, but something in the room shifted. Something in me, too. For years I'd believed that being the calm one gave me power. That by being dependable, by stepping aside, I had control over how I was remembered. But what if all it did was teach them how to forget me more efficiently? A ping from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. I returned to the couch and tapped the screen. Calendar invite. No subject line, just a title, confidential meeting, prenuptial review. Sent by Augustine Cade. My thumb hovered over the screen for a beat before I accepted. And then, instead of putting the phone down, I picked up the little wooden box again and placed it on the shelf, open, for the first time. The morning air was cool when I stepped out of my car in the underground garage below Augustine's building. Saturday, just after 10. I hadn't slept much the night before, but not from anxiety, more like my mind had finally gotten too loud to pretend it wasn't saying things I didn't want to hear. The elevator ride was quiet. No music, no small talk, just the soft hum and numbers changing. When the doors opened, a receptionist greeted me by name and gestured down the hallway. His office wasn't what I expected. Not cold, not overly grand. Sleek, yes, but lived in. A bookshelf with titles that weren't just decoration. A ceramic bowl with car keys and a scratched wedding ring he probably didn't wear anymore. He looked up from behind a long table, standing as I entered. "Elodie," he said simply, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thanks for coming." I sat, smoothing my hands over my skirt, which had wrinkled during the drive. "Let's not pretend this isn't unusual," he chuckled, nodding. "Fair enough, but it's honest." He slid a folder toward me. In short, he began, this would be a 1-year legal marriage. No expectations beyond what we mutually agree to. Public appearances, occasional joint events. You'd be compensated substantially. I flipped through the pages. It felt like reading about someone else's life, someone whose world operated on clauses and fine print. I didn't speak for a while. When I did, I asked, why me? His gaze didn't waver. Because you don't crave attention, and because I've watched you be erased in rooms you should have commanded. I respect quiet people who know they don't deserve to be forgotten. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe to listen. The voicemail began mid-laugh, my mother's voice, unfiltered, talking to someone, probably one of her sisters. Elodie? That girl always needed someone to remind her she's not the main character. Sweet, sure. But she's not made to lead. She's background. That's just how it is. The message ended. I didn't feel punched. I felt solid, like a wall had finally dropped and I could see the structure behind it. I replayed it once, just once, then deleted it. Augustine hadn't spoken during my reaction. He waited. I looked at the contract again, not because I needed convincing, but because I needed a second to swallow what I'd just heard. My mother, someone I'd always defended, excused, rationalized, had said exactly what I had been afraid to admit. She didn't see me, not as an equal, not as her daughter in full, just a support beam. I folded the paper, not signing yet. I used to think she meant well, I murmured, not even realizing I was speaking aloud. That maybe I was just hard to love in the way she understood. But now I don't think she ever looked for me in the room. He didn't nod, didn't offer comfort. That I appreciated. He waited for me to finish my own thought. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Augustine's brow lifted, more in respect than surprise. But one thing, I added. If you lie to me in any form, I walk. I don't care how many zeros are on the check. He nodded slowly. That's fair. I've lived too long on other people's terms. I'm not negotiating who I am anymore. We both stood. No handshake, no smile, just a shared understanding. The drive home was quiet again, but this time I didn't feel invisible. I felt sharp, present. There was a clarity I hadn't carried in years. I parked in front of my apartment, grabbed my phone, and called the boutique. 1 ring, 2. Hi, Janine, I said when my assistant picked up. I need to step away from the store for a bit. Personal reasons. A pause. Sure thing, Elodie. You okay? I will be. I ended the call, opened the calendar app, and added a new contact to a new profile, Mrs. Cade. By Thursday afternoon the sun was out in full force, throwing gold across the streets of downtown Santa Barbara. I parked 3 blocks away from Corvana and Company, not because I had to, but because I needed the walk. Each step helped settle my mind, center my thoughts. When I walked into the boutique, the atmosphere changed. Elodie, welcome back. The assistant manager beamed as she approached with a light touch on my elbow. We just got the new arrivals. Would you like sparkling water while you browse? I smiled, a little surprised. Not long ago this staff barely made eye contact. But now I had a last name that carried weight in the building. I'm just looking, I said. But thank you. I wandered over to a display near the back, letting my fingers hover above a modest gold necklace, simple, clean, not too loud. Something I would have picked for myself before the contract, before the voicemail, before Mrs. Cade. I was holding it up against my collarbone when I heard the laugh. It hit me before I even turned around, sharp, performative, unmistakable. Isolde and our mother. Their voices moved closer before I even had time to set the necklace down. When I finally turned, they were already 10 feet away, gliding in like they owned the place. Isolde's eyes met mine and froze for a beat. Elodie, she said, as if my name tasted strange in her mouth. You shop here now? I didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly. Or are you just returning someone else's generosity? The way she said it, just loud enough for 2 nearby staffers to hear, just soft enough to feign innocence, made my stomach clench. Our mother looked at me, then quickly away. Elodie, don't make this awkward. Your sister has an appointment. I nodded once. I'm not the one making it awkward. Isolde stepped closer, her smile tight. Honestly, Elle, it's getting weird. You showing up in places like this, dressing like you suddenly found yourself in a magazine spread. I didn't flinch. You're not fooling anyone, she continued. You've always needed someone to carry you. Now you found someone rich enough to make it look legit. I let her words settle. Let the silence stretch so long she started to fidget. Then I said, clear and steady, if I make you uncomfortable just by existing, maybe it's time you sat with why. Isolde blinked. I'm not your echo anymore, I said. So stop calling me noise. That's when the air shifted. People stopped pretending not to listen. Our mother opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure where to land. For once, I didn't try to help her. Isolde's face flushed. She took a step forward, just a little too fast. Oh, you want to act like a big shot now, she said. Fine, act like one. Her voice dropped lower, eyes narrowed. But don't think I won't call it what it is. You're using someone just like you always accused me of doing. Her hand twitched, a reflex, maybe not. I didn't move. Her eyes dared me to flinch, to retreat like I always had, but I stayed still. The clerk behind the counter took an awkward step toward us, likely unsure if this was personal or security-worthy. Everything around us felt frozen. One wrong word could start a storm. She didn't touch me first. She spoke first. This is why you'll always be backup cast. And then the slap landed, hard, fast, and louder than anyone expected, even her. The sound cracked across the boutique like glass under pressure. I didn't move. Not when her hand hit my face. Not when the tray beside me clattered to the ground. Not even when the necklace slipped from my fingers and bounced twice before settling at the base of a velvet pedestal. The room stopped. No one breathed. The sales associate froze mid-step. A couple near the register turned toward us. Someone's phone made the distinct click of a camera shutter. My cheek burned, but my hands didn't go up. My mouth didn't open. I just bent slowly, deliberately, and picked up the necklace. My fingers trembled, but I stood tall. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Then, just as the silence was beginning to crack under its own weight, another voice cut through it, clear, cold, and undeniable. Touch my wife again and see what happens. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Gasps echoed against marble and crystal. Augustine. He stood just inside the doorway, still in his navy overcoat, one hand in his pocket. His presence wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. He didn't step forward like a man defending someone he pitted. He moved like someone protecting what he respected. The moment he crossed the showroom, the entire room shifted around him. Isolde blinked, stunned. Wife. She ignored him at first, staring at me. He came directly to me and placed a steady hand at the center of my back, not possessive, anchoring. To Isolde he said, voice flat as slate, I saw everything, and you're lucky she didn't hit back because I might. Our mother sputtered. Excuse me, but this is a family misunderstanding. There's no need to escalate. He didn't even glance at her. He raised a hand slightly, and from the far end of the store two security personnel in dark suits stepped forward. Not a word was exchanged, just that simple signal. I don't care whose sister you are, Augustine continued. This isn't a street corner. This is my property, and no one assaults my wife and stays. Isolde took a half step back. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, he said, especially when it comes to who's allowed in my life or my stores. She looked at me now, confused and cornered. You married him? What is this? Some performance? I finally met her eyes. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what she'd see in mine. You didn't ask where I've been, I said quietly. Maybe you should have. The air in the room thickened. Phones were recording now. A young woman near the bridal section whispered to her friend, is that really her husband? Augustine remained calm. This location I own, and as of now your sister is no longer welcome. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Our mother stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage whatever control she thought she still had. Augustine, with all due respect, this is a private matter. We don't air our family business. This became public the second someone raised a hand in my store, he interrupted. And trust me, nothing about what just happened will remain quiet. Your daughter saw to that. The security staff reached them now. One gestured toward the door. Isolde stood frozen, face pale, lips parted in disbelief. I didn't mean, she began, but her voice didn't carry anymore. Not in that room. Not today. They were escorted out slowly, without resistance, but with eyes on them the entire way. And when the glass doors finally closed behind them, the silence broke all at once, murmurs, questions, phones slipping into pockets. I didn't speak. Augustine turned to me and asked softly, "Are you okay?" I nodded once, though my jaw still ached and my hand clutched the necklace a little too tight. The manager approached, asking if I needed anything, water, a quiet space, an escort home. I declined. Instead, I walked to the counter and asked the associate, "Can you box this up, please?" She nodded, her eyes kind now, her demeanor shifted. As I waited, I caught my reflection in one of the display mirrors. Same face, same eyes. But something in me had altered. I didn't feel small anymore. Sometimes it wears a quiet smile and watches the world adjust. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. It wasn't something Augustine said. It wasn't even something I'd read. It was the feeling I carried all week after the jewelry store. I didn't rush to fill the silence that followed that moment. I let it breathe. I let it settle. 1 week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at the boutique with my name hand-lettered in navy ink. Inside was an invitation to the Santa Barbara Women's Empowerment Gala, head table. I thought it was a mistake. I scanned the list again, flipping the card front to back. My name, but no mention of Isolde. When I brought it home and set it on the counter, Augustine glanced at it and said casually, "They reached out through my office. I'm a sponsor." They asked if my wife would be attending. There was no smirk, no weight in his voice, just fact, no performance. "And you said?" I said I'd let her decide. I took a slow breath, then nodded. The night of the gala I wore a deep blue gown. Not flashy, not stiff, just right. Something I chose for myself without committee approval. My hair pulled back, my earrings simple, the kind of presence that didn't have to announce itself to be known. When I arrived at the venue, the event staff greeted me by name. One of them walked me to my table. The centerpiece was a glass sculpture shaped like a wave. The place card read simply, Elodie Mercier Cade. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, fingertips grazing the edge of the chair. The room filled quickly, executives, local politicians, non-profit directors, women in pantsuits and women in pearls. I offered polite hellos but didn't chase conversation. And then I saw her. Isolde walked through the front doors, flanked by 2 women I vaguely recognized from her workplace. She was radiant, polished as ever, her signature laugh already in use. She approached the check-in table confidently. The woman behind the iPad paused, then typed again. "Sorry, what was the last name?" "Borelli," Isolde said, brows lifting as if the woman had insulted her. Another pause. Fingers typing again. The woman's tone didn't change. "I don't have you on the list." Isolde laughed, that same laugh she used to dismiss everything, mistakes, hurt feelings, facts she didn't like. "There must be a mix-up," she said. "I was asked to present. I've been on panels here for 3 years. "I understand," the woman said evenly. "But I don't have you listed for this year." Perhaps there was an oversight. Or, she didn't finish the sentence. Isolde's smile flickered, just a fraction, but it was enough. Enough for me to recognize it, confusion meeting consequence. She looked up past the check-in, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on me. We locked eyes for just a breath. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I simply held her gaze, unflinching. Then she looked away, turned around, and exited as gracefully as she could before the cameras caught her. Later that night, after I returned home and kicked off my heels, I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The gala program lay beside me on the table. I didn't read it again. I'd lived it. I opened my phone and saw a missed call from a number I hadn't saved, but the voicemail transcribed itself on screen. It was my aunt, my mother's sister. The message was short, a little shaky. "I thought you should know. Isolde said something at dinner the other night. Said she always made Mom love her without trying. Maybe that's why she hits hard, because you never needed to raise your voice to be heard." I listened to it twice, then placed the phone down gently beside my glass. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my planner, turned to the next week, and wrote 3 words in the margin: board application, Cade Foundation. Not revenge. Not rebellion. Just forward. I didn't need noise. I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed space. And now I had it. The drawer gave a soft click as it shut. The photo folded inside, resting where it belonged, no longer on display, no longer pretending. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence fill the space around me like water reaching stillness after a ripple. A few days had passed since the gala, enough time for the noise to die down, for whispers to shift toward newer topics. But inside, things hadn't gone quiet. They'd rearranged themselves. That morning an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. The handwriting on the front was familiar, slanted, deliberate, and hesitant. My father's. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers brushing over the seal before opening it. Inside, 1 page, handwritten, no opening line, no date, just this. I knew. I watched. I chose silence. I regret that silence more than anything. You deserved better than my passivity. That was it. No justification, no attempt at revisionist history, just an acknowledgement, the kind that had never come when it would have mattered more, but came anyway, because maybe he realized that waiting for the perfect time was how people like him lost their daughters. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the drawer where I kept bills and medical documents, not as a keepsake, as a record. The next day I met Isolde at a small cafe near the courthouse. No cameras, no audience, just 2 sisters sitting across from each other at a corner table that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and vanilla. She showed up late, of course, sunglasses on, blazer buttoned, even though the afternoon sun was unforgiving. "So," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You really married him?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who no longer needed to explain herself. "Not everything is about you," I replied. "And not everything about me needs to be explained anymore," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You act like I'm the villain in all this. You made your choices. I just stopped letting them cost me." She didn't respond, just stirred the iced coffee she hadn't touched. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope, placed it between us. "What's this?" "Open it." She did. Inside was the necklace from the store, the one that had dropped when she slapped me. There was a note: "You always said it looked better on you. I'm giving it back, but I'm not giving you me." She stared at it for a long time. Her mouth parted like she might argue, but no sound came out, and I didn't stay long enough to hear if she found one. I left without looking back. Back at home I opened my laptop and finalized my application to join the Cade Foundation board, not because I needed to prove anything, not because of Augustine, but because I had a voice now and a platform that didn't require permission. That afternoon I walked 2 blocks to the post office and mailed the envelope myself. No courier, no assistant, just me waiting in line like everyone else, holding something that no longer weighed me down. When I returned, I pulled up the form from my legal records. Name: Elodie Mercier Cade. Not for show, not to spite anyone, because I chose it. That evening I sat by the window with a cup of mint tea. The sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows over the walls. I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out one last thing: a photo from childhood. My mother and sister beaming in the foreground, posed like queens. Me in the corner, only half in the frame, almost invisible. I looked at it for a while, then folded it in half, not with anger, just finality, and placed it in the same drawer where I had filed the letter from my father. But not everything stays closed forever. Some drawers creak open again, not from indecision, but because life finds ways to remind you that even closed chapters leave their scent behind. That morning a knock at the door wasn't a person, but a delivery. A box. No note, no return address. But I knew. I didn't open it. I set it beside my entryway table, beside the photo albums I hadn't touched in years and the umbrella stand I still hadn't emptied since last winter. I didn't need to read what might be inside. Some apologies come too late, and others don't come at all. Both can live in the same silence. That afternoon I drove downtown. The notary's office was quiet, the receptionist soft-spoken. I had my papers ready, no hesitation. The man across the desk asked twice if I wanted to reconsider, as if giving up family claims was an act of desperation instead of liberation. I'm building a different legacy, I told him, signing with a steady hand. There was no ceremony to it, no one waiting outside to clap or question, just me, an ink pen, and a document that cut me loose from a weight I didn't owe anymore. On the drive home my phone rang. Aunt Delia. I pulled into a shaded parking lot before answering. Hey, honey, she said, voice familiar in that cracked walnut sort of way. I didn't want to leave this in a message. I waited. You know, she said, voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the old radiator. I spent years believing that if I just kept my mouth shut, I was doing everyone a favor. Stay small, stay quiet, and the world keeps spinning without your fingerprints on the mess. She stopped, the words catching like burrs on wool. Drew a breath that rattled. But watching you, Elodie, these past few weeks, the way you refused to fold, it hit me. Silence isn't neutrality. It's consent. Her eyes shone, but the tears held formation, balanced on the edge of lashes. That was new. Feeling the full weight without crumbling. Thank you, I whispered. She shook her head, slow. No, darling. Thank you. 5 days later I stood at the head of the Cade Foundation's boardroom table. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee gone cold. A dozen faces, donors in tailored wool, advisors with color-coded binders, staff clutching notepads like life rafts, waited. Augustine leaned against the far wall, arms folded, giving me the entire floor. I adjusted the microphone. It squeaked. I let it. My name is Elodie Mercier Cade, I began, and I'm here to launch the Quiet Rise Fund. Behind me the projector woke with a soft click. For words glowed on the screen, charcoal on bone white. For the girls silenced. I didn't pace. I didn't gesture for effect. I simply told the truth. I spoke of women who had been relegated to footnotes in their own lives, told to smile, to yield, to prop up someone else's narrative. I spoke of the ones who swallowed their stories until the edges cut going down. I spoke of the fund, microgrants, mentorship pipelines, legal clinics, publishing incubators, small engines designed to lift voices that had been pressed flat. No one leapt to their feet when I finished. No thunderous ovation. Just a ripple of nods, the kind that start behind the eyes and travel downward, settling into commitment. Afterward, I slipped out the side exit and walked 3 blocks to the community garden the foundation had revived the previous spring. The gates, once chained and rust-flocked, now stood open. Raised beds marched in orderly rows, basil, Roma tomatoes, marigolds bright as dropped coins. Children darted between the paths, sneakers kicking up mulch. One girl, maybe 7, wore a sun-bleached canvas hat 2 sizes too big. She stopped in front of me, cradling a black plastic pot. A single tomato seedling trembled inside, roots pale and searching. "Why are you here?" she asked, blunt as children are. I crouched, knees cracking, and brushed a smear of soil from my thumb onto my skirt without thinking. Because a long time ago, I said, someone exactly my size needed someone exactly my size now. She considered this, head tilted, hat brim flopping. Then she thrust the pot forward. I took it. The plastic was sun-warm. That night I stood at the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled high, rinsing grit from under my nails. I set the seedling on the windowsill beside a jar of pens and a half-dead basil I kept forgetting to water. The city outside had slipped into its lavender hour, streetlights flickering on, one by one. The box from my mother still occupied the coffee table, corner softened by dust. I lifted it, felt the familiar tug of curiosity and dread braided tight. Turned it over once, twice. Then I carried it to the hall closet, slid it behind a stack of wool scarves and the accordion folder labeled 2024 taxes. Not buried. Just relocated. Some inheritances don't require unpacking to be metabolized. Some wars end not with surrender but with the quiet turning of a page. I returned to the couch, pulled an Afghan over my knees, and stared at the seedling. Its leaves were the green of new promises. They told me, teachers, relatives, the mirror itself, that I was born to orbit someone else's sun. Support staff. Pretty backdrop. Echo, never voice. I watched twilight pool in the alley between buildings. A single bulb above the bodega sign buzzed, steady as a heartbeat. Turns out I wasn't orbiting. I was gathering kindling. And the room I built, 4 walls, 1 door, windows wide enough for daylight, has its own lamp. No spotlight required. The strongest revolutions, I've learned, often begin with the softest click of a door closing behind you. Let me widen the lens, linger in the moments the first telling skimmed past, so the story breathes deeper without altering a single brick of its foundation. The afternoon she spoke those words about silence, we were in the Foundation's resource library, a narrow room lined with donated books no one had time to shelve. Afternoon light slanted through high transoms, striping the carpet in gold bars. She sat on the radiator cover, boots dangling, tracing the embossed title of a volume on grassroots philanthropy. I'd come looking for annual reports and found her instead, shoulders curved inward like parentheses. When she looked up, the apology in her eyes was older than both of us. I taught you the wrong lesson, she said. I thought disappearing was kindness. I didn't correct her. I simply sat on the floor, back against a cart of unsorted journals, and let her talk until the radiator clanked itself quiet. She told me about her own mother, how every family photograph positioned her 1 step behind her husband, smile practiced, eyes already elsewhere. How she'd carried that posture into boardrooms, into marriage, into the raising of me. How my recent refusal to yield a single inch during the merger negotiations had cracked something open in her chest. I kept waiting for you to ask permission, she said. You never did. Outside, a delivery truck reversed, beeping. Inside, dust motes drifted like slow-motion snow. When she finished, she reached into her coat pocket and produced a tissue already soft from use. She didn't dab her eyes, she pressed the whole thing to her face, breathing through it, then folded it neatly and tucked it away. That was the moment I understood, grief and gratitude can share the same square of cotton. The boardroom presentation took 3 weeks to prepare, though the idea had lived in my head for months. I rehearsed in the shower, in the car, once aloud to the tomato seedling I'd later receive. Augustine listened to run through number 7, leaning in the doorway of my office. "I ask you. You're apologizing in advance," he said. "Stop. I'm not. You are." I know this is unconventional, is a preemptive flinch. So I cut the hedges. Rewrote until the language felt like skin, not armor. The morning of, I wore the navy suit my mother bought me for college graduation, still fit, though the shoulders now carried different weight. In the elevator I caught my reflection, eyes steady, mouth unpainted. Good. The donors arrived in staggered elegance. Mrs. Halvorson, 81, wore a brooch shaped like a swallow. Mr. Patel asked for oat milk and received it without comment. Our youngest staffer, Juno, lip-tweeted from the back row, thumbs a blur. I began with a story I hadn't planned to tell. When I was 9, I said, I won the school spelling bee. The prize was a savings bond and a photo in the local paper. My father clipped the article, framed it, hung it in his study. 2 weeks later he replaced it with a picture of my brother shaking hands with the mayor. I asked why. He said, supporting roles don't need wall space, Elodie. A soft intake of breath rippled the room. I let it settle. That bond matured last year. I cashed it to seed this fund. Mrs. Halvorson's swallow brooch glinted as she nodded, fierce. I walked them through the numbers, $750,000 pledged in year 1, 60% from women who'd never donated before. I showed mock-ups of the application portal, simple fields, no essay longer than 300 words, translation widgets in 12 languages. I introduced the advisory council, 3 formerly incarcerated poets, a retired midwife, a 16-year-old coder from Detroit. When the final slide faded, the room held its breath for 3 full seconds. Then chair scraped. Hands extended. Someone started the coffee urn, the gurgle sounded like approval. Augustine caught me in the hallway afterward. You didn't need me at all. I needed you not to rescue me, I said. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and stayed there. The garden visit wasn't on the schedule. I'd meant to return emails. Instead I followed the smell of turned earth and children's laughter. The little girl with the hat, her name, I learned later, was Amara, had dirt under every fingernail and the serene authority of someone who'd already decided the world was hers to tend. She asked her question again, slower, testing each word, why? Are you Here? I answered the same, but this time I added, and because someone has to make sure the next girl who needs a tomato plant gets two. Amara considered, then uprooted a second seedling from the tray behind her and pressed it into my other hand. One for backup, she explained. I laughed, startled, rusty, real. On the walk home I stopped at the bodega for potting soil. The cashier, Miguel, recognized me from the neighborhood cleanup last fall. "You still got that community plot?" he asked. "Expanding," I said, hefting the bag onto my hip. He rang me up, slipped in a free packet of basil seeds. "For the kids," he said. At home I repotted both seedlings into terracotta I'd bought on impulse months earlier and never used. The box from my mother watched from the coffee table like a patient cat. I carried it to the closet, but before shelving it I opened the lid one fingertip's width. Inside, yellowed newspaper clippings, a child's drawing of a house with a crooked sun, a single earring, pearl, backing missing. I closed it again. The past wasn't a bomb, it was compost. Rich, messy, useful if you let it rest. I slid the box onto the shelf, scarves tumbling over it like snow. Later, curled on the couch with chamomile gone lukewarm, I texted Amara's mother, contact info scribbled on the seedling pot in purple marker. Would Amara like to visit the foundation greenhouse next Saturday? 3 bubbles appeared, vanished, reappeared. She says only if she can bring her shovel. I smiled so wide the room tilted. Outside, the city settled into true night. Somewhere a siren dopplered and faded. Inside, 2 tomato plants leaned toward the street lamp's glow, leaves unfurling like green commas in a sentence still being written. Elodie's story, my story, whispers the same truth to anyone listening: being overlooked is not a verdict. It's a greenhouse. Dark, humid, inevitable growth. When your moment arrives, it won't knock. It will simply open the door you've already built, step inside, and switch on the light you installed yourself. And the quietest strength? It's the one that grows roots deep enough to crack concrete without ever making a sound.